Marcus Reed stood in the shadow of the towering crystal spires that made up the Zephyrian royal palace, his weathered hands clenched at his sides as he waited for an audience with King Volther. The salvage trader had spent 3 months tracking down stolen royal artifacts across 4 star systems, and now he wanted his payment, 50,000 credits, as agreed. His ship, the Stellar Wanderer, bore fresh scorch marks from his final encounter with the thieves, and the repair costs were mounting. The throne room doors opened with a resonant chime, and Marcus was escorted inside by guards whose armor seemed to be carved from living gemstone. The chamber itself was breathtaking, with walls that pulsed with soft bioluminescent light and a ceiling that appeared to stretch into infinity. But Marcus wasn't here for sightseeing. King Volther lounged upon his crystalline throne, his tall, elegant form draped in robes that shifted color with each movement. The Zephyrian monarch's skin had an opalescent quality, and his angular features bore the haughty expression of someone who had never been denied anything in his long life. "Ah, the human salvager," Volther said, his voice carrying an undertone of amusement. "I trust your little treasure hunt was successful." Marcus kept his expression neutral, despite the condescending tone. "The artifacts have been recovered and returned to your treasury, Your Majesty." The agreed payment was 50,000 credits. The king's laugh echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. "Indeed, that was our arrangement. However, I find myself creatively inclined today. I have something far more valuable to offer you." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. In his experience, when clients decided to get creative with payments, it never ended well for him. Volther gestured toward a side entrance, and Marcus's breath caught as a figure was wheeled into the room. It was a young woman, clearly of royal blood given her elaborate gown and the diadem resting on her silver-white hair. But what struck him most were her eyes, a brilliant azure blue that blazed with barely contained fury and humiliation. Her skin had an unusual quality, almost translucent in places with what appeared to be crystalline formations beneath the surface, particularly along her arms and collarbone. She sat in what looked like a mobility chair, though it was crafted from the same living crystal as everything else in the palace. "This is my daughter, Princess Celeste," King Volther announced, his voice dripping with mock grandeur. "Born with a unfortunate condition that makes her bones brittle as spun glass. Quite useless for royal duties, I'm afraid." "Father," the princess began, her voice sharp despite her obvious embarrassment, but the king silenced her with a raised hand. "She's yours now, human. Consider it payment for services rendered. Perhaps you can find some use for damaged goods." Marcus felt his jaw clench. The casual cruelty in the king's voice made his stomach turn. "Your Majesty, I came here for credits, not—" "The terms have changed," Volther interrupted coldly. "Accept my generous offer, or leave with nothing. My guards will ensure you understand the wisdom of accepting." The dozen armored figures surrounding the throne shifted slightly, their hands moving to their weapons. Marcus glanced at Princess Celeste, noting the way her knuckles had gone white where she gripped the arms of her chair. Her crystalline features seemed to shimmer with suppressed emotion. "So this is how you finally rid yourself of your embarrassment of a daughter," Celeste said, her voice steady despite the situation. "By giving me away like a broken piece of equipment to a stranger." "Careful, daughter," the king warned. "Your new guardian might not appreciate such a sharp tongue." "I'm not anyone's guardian," Marcus interjected firmly. "And I didn't agree to this arrangement." The king's expression hardened. "Then perhaps you prefer to discuss the matter with my dungeon keepers? I hear they're quite persuasive." Marcus looked at Celeste again, seeing the mixture of rage, humiliation, and fear in those striking blue eyes. She was trying to maintain her dignity in an impossible situation, and something about that fierce spirit resonated with him. He'd been in enough tight spots to recognize when someone was fighting against overwhelming odds. "Fine," he said finally. "I accept." The king clapped his hands together with evident satisfaction. "Excellent. Guards, escort them out. And Celeste, do try not to break before you reach his ship. I'd hate for him to think I cheated him." As they were led from the throne room, Marcus could feel the princess's tension radiating from her like heat from a star. He couldn't blame her, being traded like cargo would be humiliating for anyone, let alone royalty. The walk through the palace corridors was conducted in tense silence. Marcus found himself studying Celeste from the corner of his eye, noting how she operated her crystalline chair with practiced efficiency despite her obvious distress. Her condition, whatever it was, seemed to affect more than just her bones. Her skin had an almost ethereal quality, as if light passed through it differently than normal flesh. When they reached the palace's main exit, Marcus stopped walking. The guards looked at him expectantly, but he ignored them, instead crouching down beside Celeste's chair. "Look," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted. But you're not my prisoner, and you're certainly not damaged goods. Once we get to my ship, we'll figure out a way to get you wherever you want to go." Celeste studied his face intently, as if searching for deception. "You would truly let me leave?" "Of course. I'm a salvager, not a slaver." For the first time since he'd seen her, something other than anger crossed her features. Hope, perhaps, or at least the beginning of it. "Thank you," she said softly. "For treating me like a person instead of this." Marcus stood, feeling something twist in his chest at the quiet dignity in her voice. "Don't thank me for basic decency, princess. That's a pretty low bar." As they continued toward the spaceport, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that King Volther had made a serious miscalculation. Looking at Princess Celeste, the proud set of her shoulders, the intelligent gleam in her crystalline eyes, the way she refused to let her father's cruelty break her spirit, he suspected there was far more to this broken princess than anyone realized. The question was, what would he do when he found out what that was? The Stellar Wanderer wasn't much to look at from the outside, a battered Corsair-class freighter with more repairs than original parts, but inside, it was surprisingly well maintained. Marcus watched as Celeste maneuvered her crystalline chair through the ship's corridors with fluid grace, her azure eyes taking in every detail. "Tobias, we have a guest," Marcus announced to the empty air. "Ah, greetings, Your Highness," came a warm, distinctly masculine voice from the ship's speakers. "I am Tobias, the ship's artificial intelligence. Welcome aboard the Stellar Wanderer." Celeste's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A full AI companion? Those are incredibly rare outside of military vessels. You know about ship classifications?" Marcus asked, impressed despite himself. A faint flush colored Celeste's translucent cheeks. "I may have spent considerable time studying starship design and engineering principles. Father thought it was a waste of time for someone who would never leave the palace." Marcus guided her to the small common area, noting how she examined everything with the keen eye of someone who understood the technical complexities involved. What else did dear old dad consider a waste of time? Combat theory, tactical analysis, energy weapon mechanics. She trailed off, then met his gaze defiantly. "I had tutors who were willing to teach, even if it had to be done in secret." "Smart woman," Marcus said, settling into a chair across from her. "Those subjects might come in handy out here." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden shudder that ran through the ship, followed by the whine of failing systems. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power died. "Captain," Tobias announced with obvious concern, "we're experiencing cascade failures in the primary power grid. The damage from your last encounter appears to have been more extensive than initially diagnosed." Marcus was already moving toward the engine compartment. "How long until complete system failure?" "At current rate of degradation, approximately 4 hours." Celeste had followed him, her chair's silent repulsors keeping pace easily. "There's a frontier station about 2 hours from here, Meridian Outpost. It's rough, but they should have the parts you need." Marcus paused at the engine room entrance. "How do you know about a place like that?" "I told you, I studied everything I could get my hands on. Trade routes, frontier settlements, shipping manifests." Her voice grew quieter. "I dreamed of seeing these places someday. The vulnerability in her admission made something tighten in Marcus's chest. Well, looks like you're going to get your chance. Meridian Outpost lived up to its reputation as a rough frontier settlement. The docking bay was filled with ships that had seen better decades, and the air itself seemed thick with the scent of recycled atmosphere and industrial lubricants. As Marcus and Celeste made their way toward the parts dealer, they attracted more than their share of stares. Well, well, came a gravelly voice from behind them. What do we have here? A crippled princess and her pet human? Marcus turned to see three spacers blocking their path, their clothes stained with grease and their expressions ugly with drink. The leader, a burly man with cybernetic arms, was grinning unpleasantly. Move along, Marcus said evenly, but his hand drifted toward the plasma pistol at his hip. Now that's not very friendly, the man continued, his eyes fixed on Celeste. Especially when we're just trying to be sociable. Never seen one of those crystal freaks up close before. Celeste's skin had gone pale, but Marcus could see the anger building in her eyes. I suggest you reconsider your tone, she said quietly. The spacer laughed. Or what? You'll roll over my foot? What happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus. Moving with lightning speed, Celeste's chair rotated and extended a mechanical arm that caught the spacer's wrist in a grip that made him cry out in pain. My chair is equipped with industrial-grade manipulator arms, she said conversationally, as if she wasn't currently crushing the man's bones. They're designed to handle crystalline materials, which requires precise pressure control. Too little, and the crystal crumbles. Too much. She squeezed slightly, and the spacer went to his knees. Well, you understand. Let him go, one of his companions demanded, reaching for a weapon. I wouldn't, Marcus said mildly, his own pistol now in his hand. The lady asked nicely. Celeste released the spacer, who stumbled backward clutching his wrist. Perhaps next time you'll think twice before making assumptions about what someone can or cannot do, she said pleasantly. As the spacers retreated, muttering curses, Marcus holstered his weapon and looked at Celeste with new respect. That was impressive. And slightly terrifying. I may be stuck in this chair, but I'm not helpless, she replied, though he could see her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. They found the parts dealer's shop tucked between a cantina and what appeared to be a brothel. The proprietor, a tough-looking woman with short-cropped gray hair and arms covered in tattoos, looked up from her workbench as they entered. Marcus Reed, she said with a genuine smile. Haven't seen you in months. What brings you to my corner of nowhere? Power coupling failures, Jenna. Need replacement parts for a Corsair-class primary grid. Jenna Cross had been working the frontier for 20 years, and her reputation for fair dealing was legendary among independent traders. Her eyes flicked to Celeste with curiosity but no judgment. Corsair-class parts aren't cheap, she warned. Looking at about 8,000 credits for everything you'll need. Marcus winced. I don't suppose you take payment in royal artifacts. Not unless they're converted to hard currency, Jenna replied practically. She studied Celeste more closely. Though I might be willing to work out an alternative arrangement. Such as? Celeste asked, leaning forward slightly. I've got a salvage job that's been sitting for weeks. Small ship, crashed about 50 kilometers from here. Problem is, it's wedged in a crystal formation that's too delicate for standard extraction. Need someone with a gentle touch and the right equipment. Celeste's eyes lit up. Crystalline salvage work. I might be able to help with that. Marcus frowned. It could be dangerous. We don't know what caused the crash. I've been studying crystalline structures my entire life, Celeste replied firmly. It's one of the few advantages of my condition, I understand how crystals behave, how they fracture, how to work with them rather than against them. Jenna nodded approvingly. Smart woman. Most people try to force their way through crystal formations and end up bringing the whole structure down. That evening, back aboard the Stellar Wanderer, Marcus found himself studying Celeste as she reviewed technical specifications for the salvage job. She'd shed the elaborate royal gown for practical work clothes Jenna had provided, and the change was remarkable. Without the formal trappings of royalty, she looked like what she truly was, a brilliant, determined woman who refused to be defined by her limitations. "You're staring again," she said without looking up from her tablet. "Just thinking," Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from her. "About what?" "About how your father was an idiot to think you were useless." Celeste's crystalline features softened, and she finally met his gaze. "You really believe that? I've seen you handle bullies, negotiate with traders, and analyze technical problems most engineers would struggle with. All in one day." He leaned forward. "Your father didn't give me damaged goods, princess. He gave me someone extraordinary, and he was too blind to see it." The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility. For a moment, neither spoke, both aware that something had shifted between them, something that went beyond gratitude or mutual respect. "Tomorrow," Marcus said finally, "we'll get those parts and prove just how wrong he was about you." Celeste smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, it reached her eyes. "I'd like that." As she made her way to her quarters for the night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was seeing the real Celeste for the first time, not the sheltered princess or the royal burden, but the strong, brilliant woman she'd always been beneath the surface. And despite every rational thought telling him to keep his distance, he found himself wanting to know her even better. The salvage operation had been a complete success. Celeste's understanding of crystalline structures had allowed them to extract the crashed ship without damaging either the vessel or the delicate formation surrounding it. More importantly, the ship's cargo hold had contained rare minerals worth 3 times what they needed for repairs. But their celebration was short-lived. "The power couplings you need are backordered for 6 weeks, Jenna informed them grimly. "Supply convoy got hit by raiders last month. I can patch your current system, but it won't hold for more than a few days of hyperspace travel." Marcus ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Being stranded on Meridian Outpost wasn't exactly his idea of a good time, especially with their limited funds. That's when Celeste made her unexpected suggestion. "What about the arena?" she asked quietly. Both Marcus and Jenna turned to stare at her. The underground fighting arena was Meridian Outpost's worst-kept secret, a brutal spectacle where desperate fighters competed for prize money and the entertainment of spacers with too much liquor and too little sense. "Absolutely not," Marcus said immediately. "The purses can be substantial," Celeste continued, ignoring his objection. "Especially for unusual fighters. And I am certainly that." "You could get seriously hurt," Marcus protested. Celeste's azure eyes flashed with determination. "I'm tired of being protected, Marcus. I want to prove, to myself as much as anyone else, that I'm not the fragile thing my father believes me to be." Jenna looked between them thoughtfully. "The arena does have adaptive categories. Fighters with different circumstances. There's good money in it if you can draw a crowd." "See?" Celeste said, her crystalline features set with resolve. "I've been studying combat theory for years. Now I want to put it into practice." That evening, Marcus found himself in the arena's preparation area, watching Celeste make final adjustments to her chair. She'd modified it extensively, adding retractable weapon mounts and reinforcing the manipulator arms. The result looked less like medical equipment and more like a mobile weapons platform. "You sure about this?" he asked for the 10th time. "Stop worrying," she replied, though he could see the nervous energy in the way her skin shimmered. "I've run thousands of combat simulations. I know what I'm doing." The arena promoter, a slick-talking man named Victor Stone, approached them with undisguised interest. "So this is our mysterious crystal princess. You're already drawing quite a crowd. What's the betting line?" Marcus asked warily. Victor grinned. 20-1 against her lasting more than 2 minutes. "Quite frankly, I'm amazed anyone's taking those odds." Celeste's laugh was sharp as crystal. "They're about to learn an expensive lesson. As they waited for her match to be called, a hooded figure approached their corner. When she lowered her hood, Marcus saw the scarred face of a middle-aged woman with the bearing of a professional fighter. "Princess," the woman said quietly. "My name is Raven. I served in your father's royal guard until circumstances forced me to leave." Celeste studied the woman intently. "I remember you. You disappeared 3 years ago." "Your father's idea of justice and mine didn't align," Raven said grimly. "But that's not why I'm here. Word has already reached the Zephyrian court about your presence here. Your father has placed a substantial bounty on your return." Marcus felt his blood chill. "How substantial?" "Enough to tempt every bounty hunter in 3 sectors," Raven replied. "You need to be careful. Both of you." Before they could respond, Victor's voice boomed across the arena. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's special attraction. The Crystal Princess vs. Iron Mike Donovan, 3-time arena champion." The crowd's roar was deafening as Celeste guided her chair into the ring. Her opponent was a mountain of a man, cybernetically enhanced and covered in scars. He looked down at her with obvious contempt. "This is gonna be quick," Iron Mike announced to the crowd, flexing his mechanical arms. "Yes," Celeste agreed pleasantly. "It is." The bell rang, and Iron Mike charged forward with surprising speed for such a large man. But Celeste was already moving, her chair's repulsors allowing her to glide sideways with fluid grace. As Mike's punch sailed through empty air, she struck with her chair's manipulator arm, the precision grip finding the vulnerable joint in his cybernetic shoulder. Mike roared in pain and anger, spinning to face her, but Celeste was already elsewhere. She fought like water, flowing around his attacks, striking precisely at weak points, using his own momentum against him. Her crystalline skin seemed to glow under the arena lights, and Marcus realized she was actually enjoying herself. "Impossible," Victor breathed from ringside. "She's toying with him." The match lasted exactly 97 seconds. Iron Mike found himself flat on his back, his cybernetic arms temporarily disabled by Celeste's precise strikes to their control circuits. The crowd sat in stunned silence before erupting into wild cheers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor announced, his voice filled with awe, "your winner, the Crystal Princess." As Celeste made her victory lap around the ring, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't the sheltered royal he'd met just days ago, this was a warrior who had found her calling. The way she moved, the confidence in her smile, the fire in her azure eyes, she was magnificent. Later, in their private room at the outpost's only decent hotel, Marcus found himself struggling to process what he'd witnessed. Celeste had won 3 more matches that night, each victory more impressive than the last. The prize money was more than enough for their repairs and supplies. "You were incredible out there," he said, watching as she carefully cleaned and maintained her chair's systems. "I felt alive," she admitted, her translucent cheeks flushed with excitement. "For the first time in my life, I felt truly powerful." "You were always powerful," Marcus said, moving closer to her. "You just needed the chance to show it." Their eyes met across the small space, and the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Slowly, Marcus reached out to touch her face, marveling at the smooth, cool texture of her crystalline skin. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know this is complicated," he said softly. "You're royalty, I'm a nobody salvager. But I can't stop thinking about you. About us." "There is no us," she replied, but her hand came up to cover his where it rested against her cheek. "There can't be." "Why not?" "Because I'm broken," she said, the words coming out like they'd been torn from her. "Because I can't be what a man needs. Because." Marcus silenced her with a gentle kiss, pouring all his growing feelings into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "You're not broken," he said fiercely. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. And what I need, what I want, is you. Exactly as you are." Celeste's eyes filled with tears that caught the light like liquid diamonds. You mean that? With everything I am. She reached for him then, pulling him down to her level, and their second kiss was deeper, more desperate. When they finally broke apart, her crystalline features were glowing softly in the dim light. There's something you should know, she said quietly. My condition, it's not what everyone thinks it is. The crystalline formations aren't a weakness, they're something else entirely. Something my father fears. What do you mean? Before she could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the outpost. Through their window, they could see ships descending from orbit, sleek, predatory vessels bearing Zephyrian royal markings. They found us, Celeste breathed, her face going pale. Marcus was already reaching for his weapons. Then we run. No. Celeste's voice was suddenly steel. I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. If my father wants me back, he can come and take me himself. As the bounty hunters closed in, Marcus realized that the woman he'd fallen in love with was about to show the galaxy exactly what a crystal princess could do when she stopped pretending to be fragile. And despite the danger, he couldn't wait to see it. The battle for Celeste's freedom was about to begin, and Marcus intended to be right there beside her when it did.